Shabbat Shalom. For this Shabbat marking Yom HaShoah, we are incredibly privileged to have with us tonight three guests, Norman Frajman, Rositta Kenigsberg, and Dr. Wilma Siegel. Norman, I'll start with you. When you speak to people about the story of your survival in the Shoah, what do you want us to never forget about your story?
Well, my story it's a story of a survivor. Now, what is my aim in life? I'm not going to be here forever, but the word has to go out. And young people of this generation who are so very perceptive, they're so very wonderful, and unlike other generations, with all due respect, and they must learn as to what we stood for, and just to be aware that history is capable of repetition. And God forbid, a million times, if there is anything like something that happened to us, it's unknown in the history of mankind. You know, we are miracles. Anyone who survived is a miracle. We all survived in different circumstances. You know, there were partisans, there were people who were hidden by righteous Gentiles that they deserve all the credit, those righteous Gentiles risking their lives to save a human being. Why did they do it? Because it was the right thing to do. Ali Wiesel said, you save a life, you save the world. And this is what we want to live by. We want to leave a legacy here for the younger generation. So my grandchildren do not have to live through the atrocities that we had witnessed in our lives. It is that.
Norman, you have a jacket there. Can you show it to us and tell us what this jacket is and what it's from?
Can you see it?
Yes.
The first thing I must make you aware of is this here, meaning that I did not have a name. I was dehumanized by then. All I did is had a number, and that's what I was known by. And forgive me, it's my telephone. Somebody's gonna.
That's okay.
Now, again, now you see the Star of David here.
Yes.
The Germans, they had an ingenious idea. The yellow represents that we are Jewish. In my case, the red represents that I am a political prisoner. Never had anything to do with politics, but this is their format. Now, criminals had a green triangle. Homosexuals had a pink. Gypsies were black. And so all they had to do is look at your triangle and they knew exactly who you are or what you are. Now, this is a jacket that was given to me in 1944. I was in the concentration camp of Boca, and we were on the quarantine there because actually my life belonged to a company called HaShoah. They bought us in Majdanek, 3,000 of us. And the HaShoah was an ammunition factory. They were the third largest in the Reich. And you know, as the Allies were approaching, they inducted every able-bodied German into the armed forces and created a shortage in their economy. So they were forced to delve into concentration camps. And thanks to that, that I was bought by that company, I'm here to talk to you because I would not have been. And if I may stress why I'm saying it, because one of the worst days in the history of the Holocaust was on November the 3rd of 1943. What has happened on that day? Now, when I left Majdanek, there were close to 18,000 people of the Jewish faith left. But they were surrounded with people. They brought industries out of Warsaw near in a camp called Travniki, Poniatowo, and the Flukpads. And this was the time when there was unrest within the camps, that they really detonated one of the crematoriums in Auschwitz. There was a escape in Sobibor. There was unrest in the Warsaw Ghetto. And suddenly the Germans become very jittery. What is going to happen if the Jews are alive? And they designated an area code called Erntefest. Translated, it means harvest festival. And they took these innocent people, and there were 43,000 people murdered on that 1.5 days. And this you can look up on Wikipedia how it was. They took the battalion of policemen who were civilians actually in life out of Hanover and brought them in to be the shooters. And the captain said to them that we're going to kill children, we're going to kill grown-ups. Whoever does not want to participate, step out, there will be no repercussions. And you know what? 5% only stepped out. 95% did it. And their excuse after was, it is only hard at the beginning. Then shooting becomes a part of the statistics. We shoot, we kill. This is one date that should be observed by a lot of people. I was taken out of Majdanek several weeks prior to that, and as I mentioned, with 3,000, and this is what permitted us to survive this tragedy. Now, when did I come into Majdanek? Out of the Warsaw Ghetto. I was there from its inception to the very, very bitter end. I was taken out May the 3rd out of the city of Warsaw, of the ghetto, and directly to Majdanek. And if I may describe the journey there, just not long ago, I went on a March of the Living, and I wanted to see how far it was from the city of Warsaw to the destination where we were taken, because we didn't know where we were going. By bus, it was 4.5 hours, but it took us several days and nights to get there. Why? Because there were transports ahead of us that were not killed yet. For the journey, we also got two buckets, a 5-gallon bucket of water and an empty 5-gallon bucket for hygiene. Now, we can go without food for a while. It's not pleasant, but it's tolerable. But if you go without liquids, your body starts to dehydrate, it starts closing down. So anybody who was sweating, somebody reached over to moisten their fingers, to moisten their lips. And I don't mind to share with you a shameful deed, what happened within those wagons. I followed the example of some others, and we were forced to drink our own urine. Now, how can you tell that to kids nowadays, that these things, and I live in sometimes, and when I go speaking, I'm very careful who I speak to, because some young people might not believe it. I cannot touch any elementary school because I'm too graphic for that. And as I said, our aim in life at this moment, as we stand, is to prevent these catastrophes.
Thank you.
Yesterday, it was against the Jewish people. Today, it could be against Christians, Muslims, Buddhists. It's any organized religion is vulnerable. And we must prevent that.
Thank you. Amen. Dr. Siegel, you had a whole career as a groundbreaking physician in New York, in the world of hospice care, in the world of AIDS care. And then you have painted in both when you were practicing and now in your retirement, survivors of the Holocaust, their children, their grandchildren, and now their great grandchildren. And we've seen your images throughout our service tonight. How and why did you convey the biographies of the survivors and children of survivors like Rositta and their families who sit for you? How do you convey their biographies, Dr. Siegel?
The reason I did this was nobody in my family was in the Holocaust. I am the offspring of the pogroms, but we lived in a neighborhood that was completely anti-Semitic when I was a child. Across the street from where I lived was the head of the Bund Party, which was the Nazi party in America. And I had stones thrown at me and I was called Dirty Jew. My father at the Liberation brought me to the movies to see it. I was only 8 years old. And I turned to my father and I said, why couldn't I have done something about this? And so I carried some of my guilt through my life and some of the feelings of what I had experienced in anti-Semitism. And I felt it was so important to do this series. And I was fortunate to meet these wonderful people to help me to do the series. Now, what my portraits do are really what I think gives immortality to that individual. And I am hoping that their immortality is the writing message that I do, because I do both visual and narrative in my presentations for the series that I do. And I am very much against bigotry, and almost everything I do is against bigotry. I've done series of Muslim women in America, and I've done series on returning veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan. I've done many series on AIDS survivors. These are people that have all had some experience with bigotry. And this is what I care about. I care about human rights. And I believe my series expresses human rights. I want people to think about what is important about the other person. It is about empathy. It is not about me, it's about we. And so what I do and how I do it is related to what I did as a physician. As a physician, I took a history. I got to know the person. And then I began to do a physical examination. And then I began the idea of what is actually happening and what is the treatment for it. And this is exactly what I do in my studio and with the individual that I'm painting. I take a history and I look in their eyes. The eyes are the mirror of who that person is. And I do a psychological portrait. And what I wish to do with all of these people is to show the reasons why they survived. It's about love of life. It is not about death. And it's honoring their ability to keep going for the purpose of others and for themselves too. That's what empathy is. And I am so proud that this series keeps on going and that people are willing to be subjects for me to paint. And I've gone on with the second generation. I've gone on to the third generation and the fourth generation, because we cannot throw away history. That is why Norman has his purpose. He does want us to remember what has happened so that we do not repeat history. And that is my purpose in all of this. And I will continue to do it. I honor Rositta for what she's done because she has the same feelings. That's why we care about each other. She wants the world to understand this story and that it should never be repeated.
Thank you. Rosita, you occupy so many spaces on Yom HaShoah. You are a child of survivors, but you were born in a displaced persons camp yourself on European soil after the war. And you are also a Holocaust educator as head of the Holocaust Documentation and Education Center, where we at Temple Bethel have visited. So 100 years from now, with all those viewpoints that you have, 100 years from now, what do you want people to remember about the Holocaust?
First and foremost, I want them to remember there was a Holocaust. That's the most important. And second of all, I want them to remember, and Dr. Siegel and Norman both alluded to it, and this is the house I grew up in, that the Holocaust was not about only death and despair. The Holocaust was also about hope and life, reborn and redemption. And you mentioned that I was born in a DP camp. I will tell you that I had the privilege in the year 2000 of chairing the Millennium event for the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. That was such an incredible honor in all of the efforts that I have ever been asked or invited to do, because the one thing we realized early on, many survivors in second and third generation, was individuals really did not know what happened in 1945. They didn't realize that survivors did not go home and live happily ever after. There were no yellow ribbons around the old oak tree. There were no ticker tape parades. There was no home to go to. There was no family to go to. And they were interned once again in DP camps. But what happened in those DP camps that people don't know is that life was reborn. One of the most profound photographs that embolize that we had put up as our official photo of what happened was mothers pushing baby carriages, because few people know that the DP camp time, the largest baby boom in Jewish history happened in the DP camps. Life was reborn once again. They started their schools, they started their families. This was going to be I would say, the defiance, the act of resistance. They were not going to give Hitler a posthumous victory all over again. And if we want to talk about survivors and life reborn, let's talk about their courage, their conviction. If it wasn't for Holocaust survivors, Yom HaShoah would not have become that motto that it is, where you hear never again, never again, never again. They are the ones that created the Yom HaShoah commemorations, that brought the institutions of Holocaust organizations into being. They understood first and foremost that Holocaust education must become a priority to everyone, regardless of race, color, creed, ethnicity, and on and on and on. And that's why probably the organization that I've been a part of for 41 years, the Holocaust Documentation Education Center, it took 10 years. Had anyone told us it would take 10 years to get Holocaust education mandated in the state of Florida, we might have thought twice, but education is key. And for us to teach our students and this and future generations, like survivors beseech us and implore us to teach the Holocaust, not repeat it. And by doing that, we can show children where hate can lead. The Holocaust did not begin with the ovens and the gas chambers. It ended there. But then again, there are beginning signposts along the road to genocide. And one of the worst is that hatred that is spewed upon people that are different from us. And when students begin to see the documentaries, hear the testimonies that we have taken of our survivors, we have what they call the largest self-produced oral history of survivors, liberators, and rescuers. And a survivor tells you in the interview, to die was easy. And then they hear of what people are capable of doing to other people. And as Norman rightfully said, beginning started with the Jews. As Elie Wiesel said, all Jews were victims, but not all victims were Jews. So education for over all of this time is key. That's why today There are hundreds of entities and museums and programs and all kinds of university subjects and everything you could possibly think of, books, films, documentaries, and even countries, communist countries that are now commemorating the Holocaust. Elie
Thank
Wiesel
you.
also said all roads lead to Auschwitz. So that's why we have continued. The survivors taught us to remember. Remember means teaching, and that's what the second and third and fourth generation are doing.
Thank you. The thing that binds the three of you, I want to get into now. Both of you sat for Dr. Siegel's painting series, and we've seen your images in our service tonight. Norman, I'll start with you. When Dr. Siegel was painting you, what was going through your head? Were there family members or memories from your childhood you were thinking about while she was painting you?
Well, it was not an act that we were seeking glory. Now, this book is to memorialize the Holocaust survivors because we were all victims. I'm sorry, Rosita, you did not elaborate what the letters DP means. Displaced person. And this, what did they do there? They parked us to do, what do you want to do with your life after you're liberated? I had no home to go back to. I come from Warsaw, destroyed to the core. Where am I going? What am I doing? And I also went into a DP camp, had to wait 3 years until I was permitted to come to this wonderful land of ours, where I am now. I want you to know every morning when I get up, I'm just about ready to bow down and kiss the ground, giving me the freedom that I never really knew existed. I come from a very ultra anti-Semitic country. We had ghettos before the Germans came in, not with walls, but when a Jewish student was so bright that he was already accepted to a university, they gave him a back bench somewhere, and he was isolated. That was the beginning of the ghetto. And I'll tell you, you take, for instance, the Baltic countries, and that is the Ukraine, Belarus, and there's the Lithuania, Estonia. All these young people coming out of a mother's womb come out as anti-Semites. And many of them could not wait for the privilege of taking a gun and shooting a Jew. And the worst tragedy happened in those parts of the countries, in the Ukraine and the Belarus. Without mercy, life became completely worthless. This, unfortunately, is how we lost 6 million. I can tell you in my own family, I have a list of 126 people. And I don't say who perished, I say who murdered. I didn't know them all because I was a child. So I sat down with an aunt who also survived. And we compared the names of cousin, second, third cousin, came up with 126 names. I have nobody. So,
Thank you.
but I'll tell you, what was my revenge? Not with a gun in my hands. It was that I was able to establish a normal life. I'm married for 66 years to this wonderful lady of mine, and we brought up 2 children and 2 grandchildren, and this is my revenge of not letting Hitler get his goal where he is. We are who we are.
Rosita, you've been painted twice by Dr. Siegel, so I want to talk about that. I don't know, Rosita, if you want to talk about what it was like to be painted, and then Dr. Siegel tell us the story about that. So Rosita, why don't you start?
I don't ever recall being painted before. I was having, I remember distinctly an experience of thinking about all the relatives that my dad, I'm named for my father's mother. My Yiddish name is Razel, and they would call me Razela or Puppy, Puppy meaning doll, because I guess beauty's in the eyes of the beholder. And for my parents, I was a miracle. Here I was after the war in the DP camps. The most amazing thing, a child was born, and life is everything in life reborn. So from in Razela, and then I was told, which apparently was the highest compliment, that I am very much like my dad's mom. Apparently she was a fighter, and I didn't know it until I became a lot older. But the day he sat me down, and this brings me to the picture, and started to tell me, because one day when I came home and we were just about to commemorate Yom HaShoah, I remember there were so many candles lit in the dining room, and I finally was going to ask why. And I asked, and with patience and love and care, Daddy sat me down and started to tell me about as many members of the family he could tell me about and what every candle represented. And then, I heard about grandparents, aunts and uncles. I never had grandparents, aunts and uncles. I didn't know what that was like. We lived in a community when I was old enough to understand that everybody was like me. And so we all didn't have aunts and uncles and cousins. But it was that moment in time that sparked my soul and my heart. And while Wilma was painting me, I don't know what kind of hypnosis or whatever it was, I felt that moment of my dad and the family. And I was wondering, and maybe today for the first time I can ask you, did you by any chance feel any of that, see any of that? Because you said you talked about the eyes. And I remember trying to keep my eyes as still and focused. So that was a moment of endearment, and it hasn't come back to that point or intensely since then. So Wilma, maybe you can help me out.
What I feel is happening. I am a healer. I'm a healer as a physician, and I'm a healer as an artist. I think getting to your depths, which physicians do and artists do, helps both of us. We both heal on both sides. By learning you and being part of you, I feel it, and that's what you're feeling. It is something that I feel is spiritual. It's empathy.
Yeah.
And I really concentrate on eyes. And if you look at my paintings, I think that you can tell what people are about. That's what I try to do, very much so. I also have another part of this spirituality, that I had an epiphany when I was doing the first series. And the epiphany I had was that these people are surviving. They're all Jewish. The Jewish people have brought to their Western civilization the 10 Commandments. And the 10 Commandments teach us what's right and wrong in life. And the survival is the reason you are here, to teach this world the ongoing meanings of what human rights are, what morals and ethics are, and it will keep on going. And thank you for what you do, because that's what I believe. I think that's the reason why you are surviving, Norman. It's the reason I want to do this. I want to express that the human being is a very special being, and we should fight for each other. It's about we, not me. So what you were feeling was my feelings, and I was feeling your feelings. And we were really taking care of each other.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I'm glad you got that answer. Tonight at our service, we conclude with Kaddish, as the Jewish prayer service does. Every time we come to pray, we are reminded to think of those who passed away, whether it's the anniversaries of their death or in a night like tonight. Remember the 6 million and all of your families embraced of that. But as Rositta alluded to earlier, there was also life that came out. And Dr. Siegel, your paintings remind us of the life of Norman and the life of Rositta and all the people they lost that live on through them. And they really come alive. And I can't thank the three of you enough for being with us here tonight. I want to thank you and want to say to everyone, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.
Thank you.